Greetings and welcome back for another Music Theory Bite. In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to do a basic part writing exercise. If that sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, then this is the video for you. But before you watch this video, you need to watch my video on root position part writing and on writing and resolving dominant seventh chords, because we're going to use both of those in this video. So if you're ready, let's begin. Let's get started with the type of exercise that you would typically find in a beginning music theory class. In this exercise, I've been given a starting chord and a chord progression to realize in 4 parts. I've also been given the name of the key, B flat major, but I could also figure that out from the key signature and the first chord, which is a B flat major chord with a tonic as its label underneath. Now typically, I would tell my students to work things out on paper, using paper and pencil, and then transfer it into their notation program. I'm going to skip that step, mostly because this is for being put in a video, so it's a lot easier to do it this way. Keep in mind, though, that ordinarily I would be working this out with paper and pencil first, and then transcribing it into my notation program. So as I take a look at this, I already have a lot of information about how I'm going to realize this. First of all, the bass line is given to me through the Roman numerals. So I might as well go ahead and figure out what is going to go into the bass line. My first note in the first chord in the bass is going to be a B flat, and that's already been given to me. And as I work through the rest of it, I see that I'm going to have a root position subdominant, which in the key of B flat is an E flat, a root position supertonic, which is a C, a root position dominant, which is an F. I have a choice here which F I'm going to use. I could go up to this F or down to this F. It looks like I have plenty of space based on my initial voicing, so I'm going to go ahead and put it up there, keeping in mind that if I'm doing this using paper and pencil, I can always move it down to the other octave if things begin to get a little close. I also have an option of what I can do here with a 5-6-5. That's a dominant 7th chord in first inversion, so my bass pitch has to be an A. I could go up here, or I could leap down to here. I think just to make sure that I'm going to have plenty of space, I'm going to choose the lower option. And then, of course, that B flat, or that A, is going to move up to a B flat root position tonic chord, to a root position dominant 7th chord, and then back to a root position tonic chord. So my bass line is determined by the Roman numerals that I've been given. Now before I get into the next step, it's oftentimes helpful to do a little preparatory work before I start working on the actual part writing of this. What I might want to do is just write down the names of the notes that will go into each chord. That way, as I'm working it through, I will know what notes are safe to use and what notes aren't. So as I start this, I take a look at my first chord, and I already have 2 B flats, a D, and an F. As I scan this, I know that my dominant 7th chords will have 4 tones in them, so I don't need to worry about doublings. Everything else is root position, major or minor, so typically I would double the root of those chords, and then have 1/3 and 1/5. So I'm just going to take a minute here and write out above each of these chords what the chord tones are going to be. There's my 5th, there's my 3rd, and those are my 2 roots, keeping in mind that I have already placed one of those notes down there. So I will continue on to my supertonic chord, and I'm going to have a 5th, a 3rd, and 2 roots. Notice I am putting the accidentals on the letter names just to keep track of those so I don't forget about those. Next I have a dominant, which is going to be 2/5, a 5th, a 3rd, and 2 roots. And now I have a dominant 7th chord, so I'm going to have a 7th, a 5th, a 3rd, and a root. This is, by the way, a good way to learn your triads so that you're not always spelling them up from the bass if you spell them down from the highest chord member when in close position. I now have a tonic chord, so I'm going to have a 5th, a 3rd, and 2 roots. And I'm actually going to copy that one because I have that same chord coming up here at the end. So I'm just going to go ahead and save myself a little bit of work and do that. And since this is a dominant 7th chord using the same notes as I have over here, I will just copy that and paste it into my remaining chord. So these are my chord tones for each of the chords. And as I use them, I can cross them off so that I know that I'm not going to be duplicating things that shouldn't be duplicated there. Now that I have a bass line and I know what chords are safe in each of what chord tones are safe in each of my chords, I want to get working on a melody. Now, I always want to think about my melody in terms of the counterpoint with the bass. So I'm going to want to be remembering that I'm going to want to use contrary motion when I can, not to have too many perfect consonances between the soprano and the bass, although that can be softened because I am in 4 voices. So as I take a look at this, I'm starting on a B flat in my melody, and I could leap down to a G, leap down to an E flat, but that would give me voice crossings, leap up to an E flat, but that would give me parallel octaves with my bass, or stay on a B flat. And in this case, I think since it's the beginning of the piece, I don't want to have too much motion. I want to save that for a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and stay on my B flat. And then, where possible, I'm going to be using contrary motion, stepwise motion, to get to, or using common tones to get to the next chord tone. So from the 4 chord to the 2 chord, I can step up to become the root of the 2 chord. From my 2 chord to my 5 chord, sitting on a C, I think in this case I'm going to keep on the common tone. Now, whenever I have the same Roman numeral twice, I have 2 dominants here, that's an opportunity to re-voice. So here I feel less guilty about leaping, so since I'm staying in the same chord, I'm going to go ahead and leap up to an F to create that nice focal point of my melody. It's a little bit past halfway, which is where I want it to be. And then as I move on to the next thing, I could stay on the F, but since I just said this was my focal point, I kind of want to get away from it, so I'm going to go down to the D, and then over here I can move down to a C if I wanted to, or I could go up to an E flat. In this case, I think I'm going to go to the E flat to create a little bit of stepwise motion from my F to my E flat, and then of course I have to pay attention to, whenever I'm in a dominant 7th chord, I have a bunch of tendency tones. This is a chord 7th, so all good chord 7ths need to resolve down by step. And I would check that as I am actually doing my 4-part part writing. So again, since I'm doing this in pencil, I have lots of opportunities to correct things as I go along. So now that I have a soprano bass framework, I'm going to want to play it. I'm going to want to listen to it to make sure that it sounds good. So since I'm on a software program, I can go ahead and hit play, and it sounds like this. And that might be a little soft for you to hear, but it sounded pretty good. I do have a few perfect consonances, more perfect consonances than I think I would probably want, but I think in this particular example it's going to work. Alright, so I now am ready to actually start doing the part writing. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to remember my rules for root position part writing. That is, whenever I have consecutive chords in root position, I have a limited number of ways that they typically progress from one to the next. So, for example, I'm sitting on a tonic chord at the beginning and going to a subdominant. That's root motion by 4th, and it's going up. So root motion up by 4th. And I'll remember, you can check this out on my video on root position part writing. I have 3 techniques for connecting those together. The first one calls for keeping a common tone, and then the other 2 voices move by step in the same direction as my root motion. My second one calls for moving everything in the opposite direction of the root motion. And my third one keeps a common tone. The third of the chord that I leave jumps to become the third of the chord that I arrive on, and then the remaining voice steps in the opposite direction. Now, since I have a common tone already in my melody, I know that technique 2 cannot be used. There are no common tones in that technique. So I'm either using technique number 1 or technique number 3. It's really your choice as to which one to use. I would typically use technique number 1, especially this early in a piece with no particular reason to use technique number 3. So I have my common tone, and then I will have the other voices step in the same direction as my root motion to complete the chord. And I can double check to make sure that I have everything correct here. I need 2 roots, E flat, 1/3 G, and 1/5 B flat. And so I have everything that I need up here. I'll get rid of that. Now I'm moving from a 4 chord to a 2 chord. We only have one way that we typically connect 2 chords whose roots are 1/3 apart. That is, after you write your bass line, you find your 2 common tones, and then the remaining voice steps in the opposite direction to complete the chord. Now in this case, I already have the step in the opposite direction of my root motion to complete the chord, which means that I should have 2 common tones left. A C, an E flat, which I have in my tenor, and a G, which I already have in my alto. So I can complete this simply by having my 2 inner voices stay on the pitches where they were already allocated. And I double check my voicing, 2 C's, an E flat, and a G. Sure enough, that one looks good. Now I'm moving to a dominant chord from a 2 to a 5. Root motion is up by 4th, and I have a common tone. Again, this is probably technique number 1, where I'm going to have the other voices move by step in the same direction as my root motion to complete the chord. So in this case, my G will move up to an A, and my E flat will move up to an F. And I double check this. I have 2 Fs, an A, and a C. So everything looks okay there. And I can double check this by playing this at this point, or I can continue on and work through the whole thing and then listen to it then. You can always double check yourself. If you're not sure about how something is sounding, go ahead and take the time to do it, progress from one chord to the next, and see if it sounds good. Now, as I said before, whenever I have the same Roman numeral occurring in succession, that's an opportunity to revoice. I have 2 dominant chords here. The inversions are different. I go from a triad to a 7th chord, but I still have the opportunity to revoice as much as I feel I need to. So in this case, since I leap up from C to F in my soprano, I think I'm going to continue to pull the alto voice up with it. I can go as far as the C without having a voice crossing or voice overlap, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And just keeping track of the tones that I need here, I have an F already in my soprano. The A is in the bass. I've got my C taken care of. The only thing left is an E flat, which is easily acquired by having my tenor voice slide down. So everything is looking good at this point. I might want to double check, since everything's looking kind of high here, to make sure that my spacing's okay, especially between my alto and my tenor. And sure enough, I have less than an octave. E flat to C is a 6th, so that looks okay. Now, it's a dominant 7th chord. So dominant 7th chords are very formulaic. They have to resolve in certain ways. First thing I find is my leading tone, which is in the bass, which has to resolve up by step. That's taken care of for me. Next, I find my chord 7th, which is my E flat, and that should resolve down by step. So the E flat should resolve down to a D, and that looks pretty good. I have a notational error here, so I'm going to fix that real quick, change that to a stems down. Okay. And that leaves my remaining voice, scale degree 2, should come down to scale degree 1, so my C should move down to a B flat. Ordinarily, a scale degree 5 would stay on a scale degree 5, but in this case, since it's a melodic thing, I'm going to keep it right where it is. And I want to double check to make sure my voicing is good. I have a B flat, and 2 Ds. So my voicing's a little bit funny on this one. It's not wrong, it's just a little non-standard. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on when I resolve out of this to make sure that my doubled third, my 2 Ds, don't go the same direction. So I probably want to take care of that first. I'm going to start by making sure that since I have this D moving up to an E flat, this D should move down to a C. Now this is a dominant 7th chord, so I want to make sure I have all the chord tones I need. I have a root, I don't have a third yet. I have a fifth, and I have a seventh. So the chord tone that I'm missing is my third, my leading tone. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the alto voice, and notice how it's a nice step down to my leading tone, so that worked out quite nicely. I have another dominant seventh chord here, so I need to resolve this. Again, they resolve very formulaically. I find my leading tone, and that resolves up by step. I find my chord seventh, which was in my melody, and that resolves down by step. And finally, I have my scale degree 2, which will resolve down to scale degree 1. So now I double check my doubling on the last chord. I have 3 roots and a third. I'm missing a fifth, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I can fix that because we have that rule about the frustrated leading tone. When your leading tone is in an inner voice, it can, instead of resolving up by step, resolve down by third to fill out the chord. Now I have 2 roots, a third, and a fifth. So now that I have the whole thing completed, I want to play it again to make sure that it sounds good and I'm not hearing any unwanted part writing problems such as parallel fifths, parallel octaves, those sorts of things. So let's hear what it sounds like. And that sounds pretty good. So I think I have an acceptable answer to this. A couple of things I might want to keep in mind. That is, if this were the end of a piece, this probably isn't a strong enough cadence to end a piece. Going from 4 to 3 is not nearly as strong as going from 2 to 1. So if I wanted to rewrite this to make it into a 2 to 1, I could exchange my soprano voice and my tenor voice. And if I were to play this again to make this a more final sounding piece, there we have something that works pretty well. And that's all there is to it. Now I know I made it seem easy, and hopefully it was, and you'll probably struggle with it a little bit more than I just did. But doing these over and over again means that you will get better at it. This is about craftsmanship, developing some skills, developing some knowledge of what to look for when you do a basic part writing exercise. Now I cannot stress enough that after you finish the part writing, you need to play it on an instrument, on a piano or some other instrument where you can hear all the voices moving together. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've been grading exercises and I play something, and had the student just played it on a piano, they would have heard the mistake. I like to play the exercises on the piano myself because I have a feel for when I have some part writing errors in there. It's also a good idea to sing each of the parts individually. This is about craftsmanship, about making something easy to sing. So if you're singing something and you're having trouble with it, chances are you've made a part writing mistake, or you could do it in a more elegant way. Well, that does it for this video. If you found it helpful, please make sure you like it. Feel free to leave constructive comments below, and as always, make sure you subscribe to my channel for the latest music theory bites as they become available. Until next time.